And we are live!
That's what my posts say. I almost
Yeah!
followed.
We're live! Hi, everybody! Welcome to Trans Talks. It's been a while. It's been like a month, I guess. This is the most weeks weekly We Are Trans interview show, Trans Talks. I am your host, Sammie James. And we are back with another one of our trans faves. Please welcome singer-songwriter, awesome person, Seranine. How are you?
I'm well, thank you. How are you?
Good. So the first thing I ask on this show is for you to introduce yourself a little more. I specifically ask, what words do you use to describe yourself?
Wait, we get words? I thought it was like, what word?
No, it's words.
I put so much work into this. I had a whole exercise. I'll just tell you the story.
Listen, of this whole you can make it what you want.
The first thing that came to mind was humility, just the humbleness, just pure like absence of ego of any kind. Like no one is more humble, I think, than me, to my knowledge, that I've ever met anyway. But really, my journey started with being like, what is the one word question? I can never answer it. And it's stupid because I already have the answer, but that's sort of a spoiler, so I'll get to it in a minute. And I was like, what is it that I'm doing? Like, is it, am I trying, I'm like, is it honesty? Like, is honesty kind of like the word for me? And I was like, well, that's a little arrogantism. That's like coming on the show and saying you're the most humble person you've ever met. But I was like, well, I'm even during the time of my life when I'm like lying to everyone about who I am, including myself, and I don't understand what I'm doing. I'm trying to find like truth, right? So like I'm trying for honesty even when I'm failing at it. I was like, that's not quite it, is it? And I was like, I'm very sensitive. And then I went down this whole rabbit hole of like, well, but that's like an expression of being autistic. So maybe I can just say I'm autistic because that covers even more. But then I need to make sure I say I'm neurodivergent because that actually covers it better. But then I lose the fact that what I'm really talking about as like a very, very like prominent like spike in those features, like one of the more prominent ones for me is sensory stuff. I'm extremely sensitive. And eventually I was like, wait a minute, I wrote a whole thing about how this name that I made up, I couldn't understand what it was that it meant, but I was just listening to my body and be like, what are you saying? And for a while I thought this name means like radiantly joyful, because there are times when I would be just out in the world and random people would be like, wow, look at her, she's beaming or something, just random people. And I'd be like, oh, like, wow, like when I'm me out in the world, I get that sometimes, and it's really nice. In unexpected places too, like at the VA hospital from very old white people. It's sometimes like looking for the cameras, right? And later on though, I thought, well, we're often very sad though, right? A lot of the music's extremely sad. And I was like, okay, so it's about being expressive, like radiantly expressive, and letting all this stuff out. And the reason I thought it's radiantly joyful first for a while is because that's sort of like the more pleasant state. But even the being in the sadness, like getting through the sadness, the way that works for me is not like solving a problem as much as just being in the experience and then expressing about it. And that's the same kind of radiance, right? Which is why it's songs or whatever. Hopefully I'll get back to drawing someday. That'd be nice. So yeah, maybe like expressive if I had to do the one word challenge. But I didn't know I could do words. I may have misread the directions. I'm very like hyper literal. So
yeah.
Even if I got wrong.
You just changed it for everyone going forward. No.
Oh no.
No. You get one. You get one word.
Well, it keeps the show going, doesn't it? Like if you're trying to get, you pack a lot in with a half hour, then like, tell them ahead of time. Certainly, you put someone on the spot for the one word challenge. I think you're really asking for it, right?
Yeah.
But give them a day.
Yeah.
Let them do the work.
Don't make it the opposite of today's situation. It's just like, wait, one? It said plural.
Yeah, I mean, we can, I can think of other words. I don't know, stunning. What have people said about me? That's the thing. I have actually a real problem. Still, I talk about this. I'm getting better at it.
Uh-huh.
I've had a lot of laser lately. This was about 6 months. 6 months ago, I started a 6 month package. So the last session was just like a week or two ago. And I've been very satisfied with that. Prior to that, I was just slogging along with electrolysis for forever because I'd gotten some really poor advice early on from an electrologist who just wanted money from me and was like, "Don't do laser. It doesn't really work. It's not proven." Yeah, and I have the light skin, the dark. I have like exactly the ideal tones, right? So when I started seeing this electrologist later, who's just helping me for free because sometimes she has space and she does that for trans women like me who can't afford it because we have no income. I asked her because clearly she doesn't want my money because she's not taking any, right? And she's like, "Oh, you should totally do both. If you can do both, do laser and then I was like, okay." So I was like, all right, well, I'll try to crowdfund it. And I did not think that it would work because I felt like it's too cosmetic, right? People will be like, well, you can just bear it or something. Because it was like $1,500, right? It's not cheap. And that's the bargain package. That's $300 per session, but it's buy 5 and get the sixth one free. It got knocked out of the park in like under 24 hours. All these people were this is when I discovered people are very here for things that they perceive as very transgender like services. Because in contrast, I had a dental fundraiser for almost the same amount, and that was, I'm sorry to say, because there's no better phrase for it, like pulling teeth. Trying to crowdfund that took months. And most of it in the end, I mean, I did get help from a little like, $5 to $25 kind of contributions, which is how I just sort of live constantly from a number of just individual contributors. But the huge bulk of it by far was like $800 from one trans org and about $200 each from 2 individual white trans people. And then everybody else was like a little bit, right? So even like that picture is so like starkly different. I think when I did the laser stuff, the fundraising for that, a trans org sent a couple $100. It wasn't. I don't think it was that much. It might have been. I don't know. It's all a blur. I have a really poor memory. I say I have the memory of a goldfish. Sometimes I have the memory of a squirrel. Because I have to be ready with either one. Because sometimes people will say, "Oh, goldfish actually have really good memories." I'll be like, "Well, okay, then I have the memory of a squirrel and hope they don't know about squirrels."
I'm really sorry to tell you that squirrels have good memories.
Dang it! I know that I had heard that squirrels, or I'd read, I think, that squirrels don't actually have good memories. That they just work in a certain way that makes it seem as though they do, and that they just go to where they feel like they would have put a nut, and that when they go to bury a nut, they go to bury a nut where they feel like this is a good spot, and all they're doing is feeling. So if they were wrong, no big deal. A tree grows or something.
And
right?
they could just be stealing from another squirrel. It's just like,
Sure.
I told you I left
Well,
it
it's
here.
because it's
And then
it's
the next
just
day,
vibes.
the other squirrel comes. It's just like, where are my acorns?
Nothing but nuts and vibes. That's it. Just vibes. So yeah. But the thing is, I do work like that. I work very strongly on impressions. This is like, and we talk about being autistic or ADHD or things like this, about like object permanence problems, like in adulthood, problems because like you're supposed to have outgrown it, but we just don't. But the way that works for me is not. It's not so like cut and dry as it. It's a very like outsider perspective. Oh, there's so much of my experience is about people's outside perspectives being put on me, which I guess is a very trans thing, but also a very autistic thing and a very ADHD thing. So I've got like layers of it. Also, I'm not white. I lost the thread. You're hosting. What was I talking about? I do that a lot too.
I mean, I think we're still on words you use to describe yourself, but is there anything else you'd like to say in an intro? I'll ask a new question. We'll start a new
question. Let's do that.
Okay. Who would you say are your musical influences?
Oh gosh, this one's difficult. Because at the time when I'm playing guitar and picking it up, when I'm like 15 and early on, this is like the 90s, and I'm supposed to be a guy, So I'm into like Smashing Pumpkins and Third Eye Blind, and like I'm like secretly into Liz Phair, but I have to be like, yeah, like she's cool, you know, like that. I can't like connect to like why she resonates with me as much as she does, and how much like more like me she really is. Because if I'm gonna go play anything somewhere and I'm some guy playing guitar, I'm gonna sound what like Pearl Jam or something, right? I got the cheekbones and everything. So uh there's a lot of that kind of influence. I know like right before I come out, Kimbra has this first album come out. Kimbra, a lot of people I think know her best as the girl part from Somebody That I Used to Know, like Gautier song that was like the huge worldwide hit, right? So she did like she's done like okay with her own music, but not like that kind of scale. But she had her first album come out like shortly before I Remember I'm a Girl in the first place, and that was hugely influential on me. We have a lot in common in how we like think and move and sing and everything. And she actually helped me get back to singing too, indirectly, later on. So she's been a huge influence on me more recently. There's a lot of these like 90s era kind of singers like Lilith Fair, singers like Sarah McLachlan and stuff that are huge influences on me, like vocally especially, but I don't get to connecting with that until much more recently because I had this whole journey. Like when I first Remember I'm a Girl and come out, I stopped singing completely for like a year because in my mind I don't have a girl's voice, right? And that's like a huge problem. And then at some point I just sort of miss singing. I don't know, my body just kind of like wants to sing because it's a thing that she does to soothe herself, and starts singing and stops worrying about like how we're supposed to sing and just kind of starts playing around in any kind of voicing. So we start mimicking, um, typically I think mostly women, maybe entirely women, singers that'll go into like really high head voice ranges, and trying to really emulate the tone and everything instead of having it be like a falsetto tone, which is like the only way I'm kind of permitted to play in those ranges in the before times. And so I'm able to kind of connect more to the actual influence that they do have on me. But I think in terms of like song construction and things like that, um, the sort of longest term influences are those other ones. Like that's John Mayer's been a big influence for a long time too. We construct songs and lyrics in similar ways. But I noticed that my body is just this incredibly sensitive, expressive instrument who will kind of make whatever she sort of just reflects whatever she's put into. And so the best example I have of this is this song that I've been working on developing a little bit more with Village Theatre and this residency that's kind of dragging on because of the plague times. It's sort of unclear what the end is. But having them help me develop this song that is sort of a cabaret lounge jazz kind of what big band sort of sound, which is not my genre at all. The reason I have somebody helping me do it is because I don't know how to pull those what I've got like in my head out and have it be certain chords like on a piano or something. That's beyond me technically. But the music's extremely clear, and this kind of music that I don't know how to play, that I have no skill in or schooling in writing, comes from two things happening at once. One is I'm watching a particular part of Deep Space Nine, Star Trek Deep Space Nine, where there's a ton of that kind of like, what is it, like 60s era, like Sinatra jazz type stuff, right? Going on in the show. And I'm falling in love very deeply with somebody. And so my body puts together this incredibly like bombastic, over the top, like, what did I call it? Pre-op trans lesbian cabaret lounge jazz or something like that. I was like, if it's not a genre yet, it's about to be. So yeah, that comes from a place of that, and it's just that the music that I sort of listen to on my own, I guess, to kind of like soothe myself. And since I'm autistic, it'll be deep dives on the same like album or song, right? Are mostly those artists, I think. Yeah, off the top of my head.
Awesome. Second, like real like official like interview question, like standard interview question. There's really just two of them. How did you first get into music? Did you start with singing? Did you start with the guitar?
I would have said for the longest time, I took 6 months of guitar lessons when I was 15, and that's it. and that's true. And then eventually, at some point, I did actually take a little bit of guitar at community college, but it was for easy credits. It was like, well, they're going to teach me how to sight read essentially, and kind of convert that to guitar. And if I like it, I can run with it, and if I don't, easy A, right? But in terms of practical instruction of like playing, it was about 6 months when I was 15. But really, when I think about it, I don't know when I started with this, because when I'm very, 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 very small, one of my handful of tiny little bits of memories that I have is just inventing, just improvising like pop music, like, the 80s kind of, early 80s kind of pop music when I would have been like, 6 or 7 or something like that. Just whatever was on the radio, I would like make up my own versions of these kinds of things. And, they're pretty simple songs for the most part. So it's more of that same understanding, right? That even at that young age, I'm not that different from the me of a few years ago, who was like just listening to this kind of jazz over and over, and then having these other experiences, and then, synthesizing with those two elements. So nowadays, I don't too often come from a place of playing on the instrument. It's usually something internal. My body will have some kind of melody she'll hum out. It's usually a collection of sounds, so the distinction between like lyric or melody is not usually there for us. It's kind of a combination of sounds and phonemes that are not necessarily even whole words, just certain kinds of feelings of parts of words. Any number of words might work in those spots, along with certain tones. And then we'll kind of figure out what are the chords that we're kind of hearing behind them, and go from there. Sometimes while we're playing around, and if we're stuck especially and can't quite hear where the thing goes from there, we might just start playing more like noodling on the actual instrument, but that's pretty rare. I hope I've answered your question.
You did answer the question. So there are two questions I ask on every episode of this show. One is my favorite question to ask, because I think there's too much attention paid to the other side of this coin. I like hearing about this. What gives you gender euphoria?
All right, I saw this question. I thought about it. I didn't want. I started answering it, and I was like, oh, I want to give you like fresh seranine, not like frozen and microwaved, right? So what does give me gender euphoria? I think it's just, honestly, the pronouns help a lot when people just get like and acknowledge who I am, without it being like, over the top or anything, just like ordinary. That really helps a lot. I don't really, when I first come out, I'm huge into makeup, and it helps me a lot, especially when I have a lot more like facial hair, like shadow, and all that, and also making like a huge statement because I was in school at the time. So like, going from one quarter of like, well, I'll see you on the other side, come the next time with like, I was very like skirts every day, tons of makeup, right, to make sure people like got it. But at some point I just stopped wearing makeup entirely, even before the hair removal's done. So it's not really that, but I suppose even those kind of cues, like when I'm dressed in any particular way that's meant to kind of influence someone's understanding of me in a gendered way out in the world. I don't think it's as much about that as the sort of expectation that people will recognize me and be like, oh, there she is, for whatever reason, right?
Yeah.
That bitch who cut me off, right? That they, be like, oh, thank you, right?
Yeah.
For getting it. Let's see. Well, the rest is all very sexual stuff, I think. So I'm happy to go there, but I don't know if that's okay for YouTube or for this show or what.
I wish I could like say like let's do it, but I think you answered the question.
This is the
best
game show I've ever been on. I'm winning.
It's like I don't know the answer to that question. But yeah, so this is, I have seen so far on this show, this seems to be people's favorite question to answer.
Okay, I think I know which one it is then.
Oh yeah, you do. What cis nonsense are you sick of?
The audacity. The audacity is the number one thing. Just the presumption that I'm like, just wherever I am, the safe way of getting yogurt or something, right? That I am just waiting for them to tell me what they think about me. That's my big hope, actually, right? I don't care about the yogurt. I'm just there, like, presenting, right? Hoping someone would come up with some kind of criticism to steer me right again in my life. Like, guys, I've heard it. Literally just here for the yogurt or for whatever it is. There's a lot of, and the audacity is fueled by presumption, and the presumption is also really incredibly frustrating, especially since I talk about this a lot. I don't really experience my own experience of being as transgender in the sense that I'm like a guy for a while and then I'm like a girl now or something. My experience of being is horrifically abused and terrified girl who does not remember most of her life and is really temporally just unmoored in a lot of ways because of that, right? So what else is there? There's the not having any natal puberty. That my parents put me on puberty starters when I'm like, how old am I? I said I think like 15 or so, but I think that's actually wrong. I think it's more like 13 because I'm in middle school when they do this. So I can't be 15, I'd be in high school then. 13 or 14 range. Put me on puberty starters. So I have no natal puberty. There's all kind of other problems that arise from that too. But like a lot of the presumption when people meet me is that like I used to be a guy just like them or something like that, or just like any guy or something like that. Neither of those is true. And there's so much, it's exhausting because there's so much, every time I meet anybody new, even for a lot of trans people, there's this too, there's a sort of like presumption of common experience or something like that. And it's really, really tiring to have to keep explaining, to have every single person, to have to explain to them that it's not it, that that's not me. Before we can do anything else, before we can have any kind of real connection or conversation, like as like whole humans, I have to like undo a bunch of their misunderstanding of me just so that I can exist in the same space. It's exhausting.
Yeah.
It's so tiring. It's so tiring. Yeah, I think that's the biggest stuff, really.
Okay.
Everything else really stems from that. I don't even like the sort of like violence that I faced has not been too physical, or the physical violence that I faced I don't think it's been well, since coming out anyway, I don't think it's been motivated by my like transness or anything like that. But like, you know, a couple of times when like random guys will like, you know, yell at me at the street that like I'll always be a dude or something like that. Even that's like motivated by these things, right? They're coming from a place of presuming that I, you know, at some point just like went through the same kind of puberty they went through, and then like changed my mind and was like, I'm gonna like play like this now instead, or something like that, instead of understanding this like lifetime of suffering and finally getting help. Finally, like I'm going to be almost 50 before my body is kind of like something that really makes more sense to me in like a moment to moment way, like the sensation of weight in my body just like going up and down stairs and stuff like that, right? Like, is there weight here that moves a little bit? Is there not weight down here that moves a little bit when I'm just existing in the world?
Yeah.
Right? Like having that be my experience of being, and having people be like, oh, you used to be a guy. It's just like, and they're everywhere. Right?
Oh, yeah.
Of course, trans women have written the Matrix movies for us because they're fucking everywhere. And even when you think they're not, you don't know who's gonna fucking flip on you about it.
Yeah.
And it comes from that place of presumption, right, about what you are, and then the audacity to put that in your face and decide that you're supposed to respond to that right there and then on the train.
Yeah.
The thing about that is the most infuriating for me is the construction of me as some kind of like incredibly like overtly, inappropriately overtly sexual being everywhere I go. And that being put on me everywhere I go is the actual sexual harassment that we never get to talk about, because I, by existing, am supposed to be somehow sexually harassing everyone else in the dairy section at Safeway. Zoe makes really good yogurt. It's a Northwestern company. Zoe Greek yogurt. It's incredible. You can just turn it upside down, it won't come out. It's so thick, it's like custardy. I imagine it's healthy because it says yogurt and not, you know, pudding. Anyway. Yeah, those are the things. But that too, right? The sexualized aspect of it, it's still from that same place of audacity and,
Oh yeah.
and
Yeah.
presumption. So yeah, I feel like we're all saying versions of the same thing, and that's why everybody's like, we're so tired by this point. It doesn't take long either. When I first come out, I've been so hidden from the existence of trans people, really, that I kind of feel like I'm the only one. And now, after having been out a while, I am back to kind of feeling like I'm the only one, but in a different way.
Yeah.
But I'm like, I'm on this mission, right? I'm really naive, and because I'm a small girl, essentially, I'm convinced this is why Sati is such a character for me in the Matrix movies. The very, very little Indian girl who suddenly instantly turned into Agent Smith, and then later on, when she's freed from that, is restored, is still that little girl because she was stuck in that moment, right? That's a version of me, right? So me, very little girl, comes out in this very much older body, and it's like, people are like this to trans women because they just don't know about who we are. That's why I start my page. That's why I start seranine.com. I'm just like, I'll just show them my ordinary, everyday, moment-to-moment life. This will solve everything. I will personally end transphobia. People will see that I'm just, cooking eggs or something. So it didn't work.
Egg was a great choice of word.
Yeah, right. They see me cracking them all day. I mean, it's done other things, right? It's not like it hasn't helped in other ways. It's been incredibly powerful, transformative for me to just be logging my stuff every day. It's helped me get in touch with how broken my memory is, and that if I don't make these records, there's nothing, because I just, the way that I survived most of my life is by not remembering it. That was the question we talked about earlier. We were talking about gender euphoria stuff or something. I don't remember. I don't know what I look like moment to moment. I'm getting better at it, but I don't know what I look like moment to moment still. Unless I'm when I'm doing these video conferences, this is about my not being as humble as I claimed earlier on the show. I'm usually looking at myself because that's like one of the least familiar people there. I'm like, who's this? Right?
Ooh, too real.
Yeah. I talk all the time about my experience of being like this sort of like first person shootery kind of like disconnected from body feeling, and like doom hands, right? And to like get some object that I can like hit some goat with or something, right? And then like the sound is really good, and that's kind of it. Like the physical sensation, so it's still like very disconnected. That's why I talk a lot about my body. This is why I use they pronouns, actually, they them pronouns. It's not really about gender. For me, it's more about two girls, right? Like my body and mind are like separated at a really early age. And a lot of my work anymore, which ends up being the real value of my page in the long run, is just like reconnecting with her and talking about that and how I get there, right? And we've been like chased away from each other so early on that I'm starting lately to get a better sense when I turn and see myself in the mirror over here that it's not so like wow, right? It's getting to be a little bit more ordinary, but I don't know. It's surreal to wake up one day and be like, oh, like the sort of like chill like gamer chick, just like vibing in her pajamas and playing whatever is actually like me, and not just someone I'm attracted to. Something like that. Yeah.
So, moving on to some fun questions. I hope you've enjoyed the whole interview.
These have been fun. I love being interviewed. I used to, when I do my comedy and stuff too, it's that I walk around by myself here. Like the reason I'm any good at it, I walk around myself here at home, like pretending I'm being interviewed or doing little like stand up for nobody. And then people are like, oh, like how come you're like good at that? I'm like, well, I'm the crazy person ranting on the corner, just in my apartment. That's all.
Yeah. So I ask this question every episode. What is your comfort food, comfort music, comfort movie?
Oh man, comfort food. I'm gonna be, I would say something like sushi, but I get that so infrequently that it's difficult. It ends up being more like a luxury, more of a luxury than a comfort, even though it is also a comfort. So I probably would just be pizza, because that's the thing that ends up being most reliably like, hey guys on the internet, everybody, I need your help. I can't make myself anything to eat tonight for whatever reason. And the thing that I get that's most economical, that people get from me most often, is pizza. And so it feels very much like people are taking care of me. And that's an impression that I get stuck with. That's the other thing we were talking about earlier, impressions versus memory. I work on impressions. That's the object permanence problem. Anyway, what was it? Movie and what?
Movie and music.
Music. I'll often put on some kind of John Mayer. Usually the more recent stuff. I have a playlist of the last 2 albums, which kind of feel like one extended album to me in a lot of ways, and that's something I'll put on when I'm like cleaning or something. If I need to get out of my own vibrations, need to get out of my own music, right? I'll often put his stuff on. It's really like soothing, easy for me to dance to, and things like that. And then movie, comfort. Fuck. I don't know, because Watchmen is the director's edition. The Snyder cut is probably what they call it anymore, right? God, I'm really washing out there, aren't I? It's my white half coming in. Is a hugely influential movie for me, but I would not say that I put it on for comfort. And by the same token, I think in terms of movies, I probably would really find like when I was homeless, one of the only things we had around was the Lord of the Rings extended edition and this tiny little fold in half DVD player, right? Portable DVD player. So that shit was on 24/7, and it feels a little bit like I don't know, getting through that tough time, you know, and like the movies are in their own way getting through really difficult times. The stories are. So that's probably like the closest thing to comfort movie. But again, I'm autistic and think of it as sort of one enormous movie. And then it has to be like the special edition. So it's like 9 to 12 hours of a movie. And that's a little bit of you're really committing to being comforted at that point. You know, like, listen, I have vaginoplasty coming up. And when I'm in recovery from that, that is absolutely the time I'll be like, let's watch The Hobbit first, even though it's not that good. We'll just watch the whole trilogy, right? We'll like do the extended edition. We'll watch the behind the scenes stuff. Then we'll watch the Lord of the Rings. We'll do it over and over. We'll talk about it. Because what else is there to do but lay there and be like, my crotch hurts otherwise. So, yeah, I think that's it.
Yeah.
I love a nice soup. If I'm when I've got the energy to cook for myself, some of the comfort foods for me they end up being about the process of cooking. And about kind of disconnecting from the demands of linear time and being in the sensations of foods, vegetables, and meats and whatever, just like turning from one thing to another with the judicious, practiced application of heat and various oils and seasonings and so on, right? Like the whole experience of it ends up being a comfort that then results in a dish that's very comforting, in part because of the buildup, right? I do the simple egg and potato and onion skillet, breakfast skillet, often most mornings, and part of my little daily diary thing often includes pictures of my food and what I've been making and how I felt about getting there and stuff like that, or what's going on around it. Right? So, other ways to think about comfort food.
Yeah. Awesome.
Oh, there's just no winning with this. If I pull the blinds here, the last 2 are busted, and they just kind of flip whatever way they feel like. So it would just it'd be like, anyway. Well, it looks like we've run our half hour anyway.
Yeah. So last question: who are some trans folks you think are doing great work? That can be artistically. It can be, activism. It just.
This is a difficult question for me because like I mentioned, I alluded to earlier. I don't feel very part of transness or trans condition or trans community. I know that I definitely am, and I know that especially from the outside, people's first read of me is like their easiest understanding of me is they're gonna have a much easier time reading me as transgender than understanding me first as intersex and going from there, right? So like I get all of that. And also I feel really disconnected from a lot of this stuff. And the only person who comes to mind really off the top of my head is, I'm not sure what name they're using now. I think they're still going by Maddie Mooney, as a local to Seattle area activist. And they were part of Ingersoll Gender Center. They've been one of the driving founding forces of Trans Women of Color Solidarity Network. I talk all the time about how I have a lot of visibility that I just so much of my visibility comes from such a stupid place. I had like one viral post like right after I launched my page, and it got me like 2,500 followers, which is like half, like more than half of what I have on that page. But oh gosh, I'm sorry, I lost the thread a little bit. What was the question again? Oh, other trans artists. That I talk a lot about being able to fundraise and stuff like that, really in a way that a lot of trans people can't. And for people to not look at my existence as like a way that trans people can get by so much as like understanding that there are a lot of other trans people, especially trans women, especially trans women of color, especially Black trans women, right? Who don't get the same kind of exposure that I get, and who have a lot more trouble raising money for the same needs, just for food and healthcare, you know, for shelter needs, basic stuff. So whenever we have any interaction, I talk a lot about that they've helped me and they've helped me often, um, and that they help a lot of other people who don't have the same kind of privilege of visibility that I have, who have the same issues or more, the same and a lot of the same difficulties and struggles, and additionally lack the kind of visibility that I have that would let them get some fundraising done, get their needs met. So yeah, Maddie Mooney is, and their insights have also are just constantly really incredible. They help me understand a lot about myself. They help me understand they help me understand that I'm not white, which is like super obvious, right? Because I'm literally not. But I was raised really completely along those pillars, right? Of being cisgender and heterosexual and white and male and neurotypical, and like none of those are me. But each of them was sort of individually and together like drilled into me, right? So I didn't understand how much of my existence is about being a very not white girl who's being made into a very white boy. And they help me understand that, and like really like claim it and own it, instead of being stuck still sort of like perceiving myself as some sort of version of some kind of white guy or something like that. They've been a huge help in my life.
Awesome. So final thing, where can people find you on the internet if you want them to do that? How can people support you?
Oh, well, support me. Well, difficult
Or,
question.
social media, all of those.
Yeah. So seranine.com. I'm basically me everywhere, and I usually have the same picture and everything too. I mean, definitely, I guess, double check and make sure, because there are like a small handful of people who dislike me and are imitating me for whatever reason on the internet. But seranine.com is my Facebook page. That's my like biggest platform. I have Aggressive Front Pocket on Instagram, which is finally coming true in May with vaginoplasty. That name's been around for forever. There's a whole stupid story about it. But yeah, it's definitely, I always tell people, don't think about it too hard. And now I'm like, it's exactly what you think. On Twitter, which I don't use too much anymore, I keep trying to use it less. It's Sarah, SERA, and then the number 9, and then Elliot with 2 L's and 1 T, to help people pronounce it, but I don't know that it's working. I have a Patreon. That is a huge help. If you have even $1 a month you would like to contribute to my work, especially since I've been fighting without great success for years to get disability support. And the way that I have been surviving in the meantime is just by begging on the internet. So being relieved of that to any degree by having people contribute at patreon.com/seranine or linguisticautistic.com also redirects there. I don't really publish anything there. I publish stuff all over the place elsewhere. You're supporting my giving myself away and not thinking in terms of transactions so much, right? My music is available at seranine.bandcamp.com. Right now it's a triple album trilogy released in separate pieces, a trilogy called Automatron. And it's in release order. It goes Signs of a Struggle, Exile and Guy, Final Flight of the Solanus. It's all acoustic because that was the budget. I'm working on more stuff, and that would be the place to follow if you want to know about that. The music's actually available on most streaming platforms as well. Apple doesn't have Exile for some reason, but the rest of it is all everywhere else too. And what else is there? Oh yeah, I stream a lot, especially more and more lately. I'm trying to embrace like the fact of how disabled I am and stop sitting here like scrolling social media all day and just sort of feeling like I'm supposed to be doing something, but I don't know what it is. It's working and I can't do it, and I need to accept that. So I've been streaming more and more when I'm in my relaxing time, and I'm accepting that this is what I'm doing at twitch.tv/seranine. And I think that's a pretty good coverage. Are there any major platforms that I missed? I'm on LinkedIn, but who does shit with that? right? I don't know. People message me on LinkedIn once in a while. I'm like, "Why? What are you doing?" Like I talk about what do you want me to come talk to you about anti-capitalists? Like I don't know. I don't even not even have like a good theory about it. I just like have
Yeah.
my own experience, right? Like, what am I gonna do for you? I talk all the time about how I can't work for anybody. Anyway, find me on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
Please don't. Please don't. I'm kidding. I'm on Fat Life.
I'll throw it in the comments of the.
I'm on YouTube. YouTube.com/seranine is actually me, but I haven't put anything there in forever. And I was just yesterday, maybe the day before, watching somebody in some community space asked about people who've had orchiectomy, and I thought I've had orchiectomy, and I even did little vlog entries and a whole blog post and stuff about it way back when. So I shared those, and then I watched them, and I was like, "Oh, honey, you have no idea what's coming." All right, poor thing. But still informative to look back and see that. And I thought with vaginoplasty coming up that I might possibly on youtube.com/seranine start putting some of the same kind of content there. Just like here's how that went. And publish that everywhere instead of just doing mostly what I would do anymore is live streams on seranine.com. But my most prolific space is definitely seranine.com. That's the Facebook page. And probably second most anymore is Twitch. Because I have been streaming a lot, and I try to. I think it's part of my whole problem about being able to relax. I really struggle to just do stuff for myself by myself. Like really, really, really struggle. I think part of my streaming is coming from a place of, well, at least it's being useful for somebody. That I'm sitting here and playing. I'm like soothing other people with my way of playing or something. Yeah. So I'm on there a lot anymore.
Okay. Well, Seranine, thank you so much for talking to me today. This is great.
Thank you for having me. I really, I'm excited to be the first one of the year and kick this off and have a lot to talk about. Like I said, I've spent all this time being like, here's what it would be like to be interviewed, and just babbling to a host who's me, asking host questions. So it's nice to get out in the world and run and do it a little bit once in a while, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, and thank you everyone for watching. We'll be back next time with another wonderful conversation with one of our trans faves. Until then, take care of yourselves and goodbye.